Welcome to the Action Shooting Show. Tonight we have a special episode here where I'm going to do a interview with actually an old friend, Eric Stoner from Stoner CNC. And I think we probably first met each other, what, eight years ago?
That's what I was trying to figure out because it's been a while. That's like, I think you shot like your first three-gun match like just after I started.
Yeah.
Like 2016 maybe?
That sounds about right. Yeah, it was October is when I first started shooting. I think October of 2016. So,
okay.
So, maybe it was before. It feels like, I think I'm coming up at 8 or 9 years now.
It might have been 2015. I was trying to figure out the date.
I think it's 2015, yeah. I'll have to look back. I'm sure I've got some pictures or something floating around somewhere. So first off, because I always forget to do this, if you've watched this show, if you like what we're doing here, like, share, subscribe to the show. We'll give some information about Eric's, the company he's with, and that you go follow them as well. I know they're on social media doing some stuff. So, Eric, do you kind of want to share what you're on here and what Stoner CNC does?
It's actually my brother's company. So my brother makes knife and gun handles, mostly knife handles at this point. So he makes about 100,000 grips for knives a year. Then he's been doing gun grips, but that business hasn't been as busy as the knife business. Now he's kind of getting into blades, so he's water jetting some blades and doing some mid-tech straight blade knives. So eventually he's going to launch his own knife blade line coming out, but he does a bunch of stuff for a lot of big companies. He's just the guy in the background that doesn't get the credit.
Yep, understandable. And you want to share your kind of shooting background just so people here kind of know where you're coming from in the shooting world?
Sure. I started about 15 years ago. Like a buddy from work took me out to the range. He had an AR-45, so it's basically a PCC AR version in 45, kind of an odd gun, but it was really cool. So at the time I was like, man, that's cool. I've never shot an AR-15 before. So I ended up buying a AR-9, which was the old Colt version. That was about 15 years ago. Then after shooting that, just kind of at the range, plinking around, I watched a Three Gun Nation video, like with Keith Garcia and Daniel Horner. I'm like, wow, that looks like a lot of fun. And I was trying to think when that was, and I think it's like right after Sandy Hook, because at the time I was trying to build an AR-15 to do that, and everything was off the shelf. Like he couldn't buy anything. So my brother and I, like, we're both engineers and we like to make stuff. We decided, well, we're going to make our own lower. Like, so we bought literally a block of aluminum. We did all the CAD CAM on it, and we cut out a lower. And it probably took us, I don't know, maybe a year doing it on weekends, kind of playing around. Like we didn't hit it really hard. Then by the time I built the gun, I went and shot my first three-gun match with it, which, like Ron and I were just talking, it might have been 2015. So that's the lower I've used on every single one of my three-gun rifles. So for the past 8-9 years, I've used that lower exclusively on whatever I'm shooting three-gun with. So I started shooting three-gun pretty heavily about 2015 timing. I remember meeting Ryan at the match. He's always kind of unique and like stands out from the crowd. I think you showed up with like a pump shotgun, right? It might have been a 20 gauge your first match.
No, it was a 12. It was a 12, but yeah.
And for some reason you stood out. Like I don't know if it was just that you were just excited and just having a fun time just with what you bought, but you got into it pretty heavily after that. Then I did three-gun probably pretty competitively till about 2018. And I made it up to semi-pro in the three-gun nation ranking, and was right on the edge of making pro in their classification system, and that's when they went kind of belly under. So about 2019, I started shooting USPSA, and during that time, of course, I like to make stuff, so I got into three-gun. I was like, I need a 2011. All the prices on 2011s seemed ridiculous to me at that time. So I built my own 2011, which is actually in the background back there. So we cut the slide, made an island barrel on it, and I ran that pretty heavily for about 3 or 4 years. Shot it in USPSA limited, which is a minor gun. So when you shoot against 40s, you got a huge disadvantage, which I found out, but I was just having fun doing that. Then COVID hit and I kind of took maybe a year or two hiatus. I didn't really shoot much, maybe a match or two here. Then fall of 21, some of my buddies said, hey, there's a still challenge match in Piqua, which is about 30 minutes from me. You got to come and try it. Just bring a rimfire gun. And like my practice gun for 3-gun was always a 22. Like I had a 22 AR conversion. So I brought that, and I thought I was pretty good with a rifle, and I ended up shooting like a low BC classification and that, but it was a lot of fun because I didn't have to reload. It's fast. Like you go to the match and 3 hours, you're all done. You get to go home. So instead of being like an all-day event and having to bring a whole bunch of gear, you just bring a 22 and go. So I got into that real heavily in 22. I made master my first year shooting it. Then like it took me another, I guess, 23 spring. I made GM with rimfire rifle open, which the jump from master to GM was a huge challenge. Like going from B to master was easier than going from M to GM. I don't know if it's like a mental thing or if it's just the speeds and the consistency you need at that. Because like if you shoot a master score, you can miss a plate here or two out of your 4 runs. If you want to shoot a GM score, you got to have 4 clean runs that are pretty fast. So just for instance, like a rimfire rifle shooting, you shoot 5 plates and still challenge, and they take your best 4 runs and add up all the times. So you got to be about a 1.5 second to under 2 seconds on most of the stages for each of the plate runs, and average that out to like 7 to 8 seconds. So you got to be smoking fast and mentally consistent. That's probably the other big thing, is that like I'm an engineer, I'm doing the math in my head, so I know like, oh, if I have another good run, I'll make this. But so I did that. Then the cool thing was that Still Challenge is really friendly for kids. So my daughter's actually doing it with me. So last year she shot, as a 9-year-old, she shot Still Challenge with me, which for kids it's awesome. Like all the parents are like, her grandkid parents are like, hey, bringing her candy and drinks and all kinds of stuff. So she shows up, and we just go there and they kind of cater to it, and everybody's happy to see her. So last year I kind of shot it more for fun than competitively. Then this October, I hadn't shot USPSA in years, so I was like, I want to see where I'm at. I got a classifier match, and lo and behold, my Still Challenge skills like held up, and I classified as a master with a PCC, just a little short of a GM. So on a stand and deliver stage, I'm pretty good, like moving and shooting and doing all the USPSA stuff. Not so much, but if it's shoot a bunch of stuff real fast, stand and still is kind of where I'm good at.
Which is a lot of the classifiers. I mean, there's not a ton of moving in a USPSA classifier.
Yep. So like when it was pretty similar to like a Still Challenge match, you're shooting an AR rifle in 9mm versus 22, and like you said, you're not really moving. You're just pulling the trigger really fast. So yeah, for that part, the transitions.
Yeah, and you know what? Still Challenge is probably the best entry-level competition shooting that I think somebody can do. Like that, or like the Glock matches, because it's very like static. You know, you're in one place for the most part. I know there's like at least one stage where you're going box to box, I think, but it doesn't have all the dynamics that USPSA and 3-gun does. So if someone's just getting into the sport, I think that's probably a pretty good place to kind of cut your teeth and learn the safe gun handling and kind of being under the stress of a clock and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Basically, if you've never shot a match, ideally you'd go shoot a Glock match or a Still Challenge match. I think you and I did it in the opposite order. We picked the most complicated match style to shoot first.
Yeah. Yeah, which worked out. And like I tell people, like if you absolutely aren't going to go to one of those other ones, come to a 3-gun match, come to USPSA. We'll get you through it. But if you could do it in an order, I definitely start with a 1-gun sport, and ideally, like I said, Still Challenge or USPSA or the Glock matches and stuff. So, all right, well, let's get into so your brother's got some CNCs sitting around. Probably some idle time every once in a while. And how did you guys get from doing that to, I mean, obviously we've talked about you've made lowers, you've made gun, a whole 2011. Like, what's the jump from there to a muzzle device?
So my brother, let me share my screen.
Okay.
That pop into that pops up.
Yep.
And so my brother, in I guess it would have been last September, he bid on this 5-axis machine on an auction site called Bid Spotter. He threw kind of a bid in there as a joke, like, "Hey, I'll never win this auction." Well, lo and behold, he won the auction on like a low ball bid on this machine, and he gets it, and he's like, it's not really ideal for anything he's doing. He's like, well, what am I going to do with this? This thing's really cool. It's got lots of opportunity, but I don't really have the product for it. So I was like, you ought to build like a 223 comp. Like the best comp, they have rearward facing baffles, and like with a 5-axis, you could do some really cool stuff. So he agreed to it, and he's not really into guns, like as far as shooting and performance. He makes grips for him. He likes guns, but he's not like the competitive guy. He's kind of like maybe tactical, maybe a collector. So he's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. So he's like, why don't you kind of figure it out? So this turned into a massive project. That I was like, so I built a sled to kind of seen him online. Is like, all right, I just need some linear bearings and basically plate to slide this on and mount the gun on it. And my dad helped me, and my dad's pretty creative and pretty innovative. So we're actually firing the trigger with a mouse trap. So if you see the mouse trap in there, that just smacks the trigger bar and activates the gun. Great. And it slides back. So, I had a bunch of comps laying around from shooting. And I started figuring out, like, well, which ones are really good and what's making them good. So this was a long process. And like the whole idea initially on this brake was, I want to build the best race brake, dedicated hardcore race brake for shooting 3-gun or something like that. There's kind of going through this whole process. It's not really a one brake fits all descriptions. That you're going to have some, I guess, certain brakes are going to do better at certain things. So with like a race brake, it's going to be loud and fast like a race car. But if you want low recoil, you're going to give up some advantages of like low flash and noise. So we started making these on a Bridgeport mill because we didn't have the 5-axis programming figured out. That was another reason why the machine was, we'll kind of jump into that. But so my dad and I were making 3 or 4 breaks on a weekend and kind of testing some ideas out, and said the goal was to make this rifle shoot like a 22 or the best we could. It's low recoil. So we went through like 35 different designs, maybe a little more by doing this. Like that's just my stack of breaks there. We'll kind of jump into the process and our thought that what we were doing on that. So the first idea that I was thinking, I didn't really understand brakes. Like my idea is like, you see like the JP Eliminator brake, that big brake, that diameter has a big effect on it. Well, what I learned on this is not really. So the gas coming out of the barrel, think of it as like a high pressure nozzle. It doesn't expand out like that and hit the sides very quickly. You have such a short distance in between the ports and such a high pressure, like you got just a little bit moving out on it. Whereas sound kind of moves out a little further at a little bit different stuff. And I'm an engineer by trade, but like some of this mathematical stuff's a little more trial and error and like hands-on, let's try this, I think this works. And we tried a bunch of different designs. So like I said, we tried 3 different diameters, and really the 1-inch diameter kind of fit the bill. It was the largest you could allow for a brake in most of the divisions. It offered a little more real estate on the ports, which you're not really giving that much up by like going a little smaller. It's just you got a little more real estate to work with to kind of direct some of the blast. That if you go with a shorter brake, that diameter going around, you get a little more blast coming back at you on the top. So diameter doesn't make much difference. The next thing we started doing was, well, we wanted to test some internal designs, so we cut some brakes and just made them thread so you could thread in like these little adapters with different stuff on them. And we learned a lot about what not to do on that one. And I mean, after going through this process, I can look at somebody's brake and tell you like what they're doing bad and what they're doing good, and kind of tell you about hey, it's going to compare about like this. So it's a more learning, a lot of like not, but a lot of what not to do on that part of it. So the next part was we started experimenting with different port widths. So we played around with that, and a lot of it was more of what you could manufacture than the port width doesn't have that much difference on it. That it's more about manufacturability than actual size. And we also played around with the internal diameter. So you need clearance for the bullet. And what they say online is you want about 30 thousandths to, we figured about 80 thousandths. So you really don't lose anything on that. If you're under 30 thousandths, one, you've got the risk of like a baffle strike, and two, it's actually slowing down your performance. I'm not sure on the physics on that, but what they say online is correct. 30 to 80 thousandths, and it's pretty much identical. So you just pick a drill size that's common and a clearance you want to run so you have the least chance of a baffle strike. So this is what I guess is what definitions creates the character of the brake. So a lot of the old style brakes are 3-port straight 90-degree cuts. So they'd be done on like a 3-axis CNC machine. So the performance really comes when you start going at the rearward angle. So when you direct this angle backwards, any of the real good brakes that have the most amount of recoil reduction is going to have a baffle coming back at you. So this requires more expensive machinery and higher level programming. That at minimum you need a 4-axis machine. Best case you'd have a 5-axis machine so you could really shape the ports how you want them. So like I said, it's way more challenging on that. So the cost should go up on that, but the performance will too. So like I was talking about on the baffle angle, so this is kind of a notorious brake, probably from when we started shooting the SJC Titan. This thing's notorious for being loud for the ROs. That if you look at it, I stuck a pencil in there and you got a 40-degree baffle coming back at you. And the way they've got their shape on their round ports is that really round's about the best flow you can have. Like think of a port on an engine. Well, it's basically shooting the jet straight back at 40 degrees, which is probably about right where your RO is going to be standing if he's trying to time you. So they kind of got a bad rap. It's not terrible for the shooter, but the RO is definitely louder on that. And the thing with the sound waves is that unlike a high pressure jet, they kind of distribute a little bit faster. So they're going to be about 20 degrees clocked a little more. So you get a little more of that concussion than you would straight back at 40 degrees. But you got to remember, you're on a 16-inch barreled gun, you're about 20 inches away. So it's not terrible. So that's what everybody's trying to balance on these. Where you get into like the Apollo Max, they got a little bit different design on the baffles, but they got a really steep baffle design that's coming back at 52 degrees. So you're going to feel some of that, but it distributes it more than the round port because they're kind of dished. So that was one of them that was real loud in our test. Like I said, none of these are going to be super quiet. Ours is kind of about where everybody's ending up, about 35 degrees on the baffle. So in my one video, I kind of tried to explain that because I get a lot of questions on how they rank on concussion. So I said they're all kind of like a hot pepper, right? Some are just spicier than others. Like, I mean, obviously an A2, you're going to have hearing protection on. Like a 90-degree port one like the Mikulik, you don't want to be standing right next to it, but still loud. Then some of the other ones, you're going to get a little more noise coming back, and especially if you're the RO, they're probably not going to be super excited to be blasted by one of these, but it's just kind of the nature of the game. I always double up on my hearing protection. I think a lot of people do, just to prevent some of the noise on that. It's really manageable at that point. So, like I said, think of them as race cars on the brakes, that you're going to have a lot of noise. You're going to have some fire. So the brake in this picture is the Unrivaled. And for whatever reason, I was shooting some Russian ammunition and it was throwing some flames on it. I guess my thought on that is that the Unrivaled does it a little different. Their brake is actually a weldment. So if you look at the brake, like right before the first port, there's a weld on it going around. They have like an expansion chamber in there. I don't know if it just mixed the gases just right with that Russian ammunition, but it was shooting flames like a flamethrower when he shot it. Like it didn't burn my hand or anything, but it was just like, wow, that's a lot of light coming out of it. Good for a picture.
Yeah, and I agree with what some of from using the Hollywood and then comparing, like, I've shot a hyper tap. I've been around a lot of the SJCs. The SJCs are absolutely brutal to RO, and your guys is definitely is not, as you said, it's definitely not quiet. I mean,
Yeah.
any good break is going to be, especially for ROs, it's really blasting it back there.
Yeah, so that's the downside of them. And we played around with that, and I'll kind of get into it a little bit, but you change those baffle angles. We went steeper at one point. It was obnoxious, so we actually toned it down. You got a slight increase in performance, but definitely not worth it. So the next thing is that my perceived thing was that, well, you got to put tuning ports on this thing. That's what everybody tells you, and like you're thinking that you need to put tuning ports on it. It's like I played around with that, and tuning ports actually make it worse. So like if you got a really good break, like our design or the Hyper Tap or the Apollo Max, you notice they're all 4 ports with a rearward facing design, and they take the recoil down to almost nothing. So when you don't have that much recoil, the tuner ports are actually causing a reaction in a different direction. Like, so when I put the top holes on that, it was pushing the gun down. Doing some of the testing, you could see that with, like, say, the SJC. I wanted to nose dip a little more on that. And I gave it to some of my buddies too, like even our PCC version. They're all like, yeah, we need tuner ports on the top. Like, I gave them four brakes with holes in them, like, then one without. And they're like, the one without holes in the top is way better. It doesn't move. And part of, I think the movement is that if you got a more recoil, your gun's going to move because you got the reaction of like the handle and some other stuff. So we're cutting the recoil down from like a Miklik 3-port in half. So the Miklik traveled 20 inches. Ours traveled a little over, say, 9.5, 10 inches on the sled. So when you cut the recoil down that low, really there isn't much reaction on the gun. So,
well, and I'll say something I've noticed, and it's funny we're talking about this. A bunch of years back when I was way more into 3-gun, me and a friend actually. All right, we're back in. Where did we leave off? I don't know what all you heard or where it stopped.
You were just asking the question. Is my screen sharing with you right now?
Yeah, it's sharing. Yeah, so I noticed that besides for the back and forward, when you got a lot of back push, it seemed like it can make the muzzle go a little left and right. Is that anything you noticed in your
Yes.
testing?
It created some erratic movement. Like ours, especially with the baffles being so aggressive that there's so much pressure coming out of those ports. Like even with the tiny one, it was a little unpredictable. Like you'd shoot it up and create an unbalance in the gun. Like you said, it'd be erratic. And there's some breaks like the Unrivaled. They're saying you can tune that. What I'm saying is just buy a better brake. So if you buy like an Apollo, a Hyper, or a Stoner CNC, you don't need to tune them. They're already balanced. Like during my testing, like in one of the videos I show like the Unrivaled, I'm shooting as fast as I can and it pulls to the side. And it's got tuner ports, but I'm not sure if it's really the gun moving to the side or if it's just that you got recoil and it's kind of pushing on your shoulder and it's kind of your input. I'm not sure how consistent you could be on it. That's kind of what I found on that stuff, that if you had one with even ports that are all even on each side, the recoil is predictable. You start adding like a force to the side of it, all your recoil motion is going straight out the gun and your bullet going back, and it should just return right on it.
Yes, and that's what I noticed about yours, and I think your ports kind of being as aggressive, you are getting a little bit of, you're getting that up blast there, if that makes sense, at the top of your ports. So it does seem to negate any, left to right, like it kind of holds it centered from what I noticed.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we did on ours, is that the rotation on that 5-axis, we go kind of high up, so you do get some going up, and it's enough to keep the gun, at least on my gun that I tested, flat. Like I didn't test a whole bunch of other guns, so I know there's a variety of ways to make an AR-15, but mine just shoots flat, flat. Is that kind of what you noticed when you shot our break?
Yes, yeah, yes, I did. And then there's one thing for people, and we kind of talked about this when I was mounting it up, and I've done this with other breaks. If you do get a little bit of this like side to side play, you can cant your brakes, a little bit, left or right, whichever way the gun is moving to kind of get just a little extra to push. I went right up, and I didn't really. I mean, I noticed it pretty straight back, but I've done that before on brakes. And
Sure.
your self timing. Not, I really like that on brakes. That's a very nice feature we haven't talked about yet, but that makes mounting them really easy, and timing them really easy.
Yeah, I feel like at a certain price point, you got to add another nice feature like that. And that's something simple to do, that it's just basically reverse thread nut that you put a wrench on the brake once you get it set, and you just tighten it down, and it allows you to take the brake off really easy. If you want to adjust clocking on it, you can just twist it a little bit. Like, unlike a crush washer where you keep twisting, and if you go too far in a crush washer, you either got to get another revolution, or sometimes you can't even get another revolution. I've had it where you cracked a crush washer. So this allows you to put it exactly where you want. You can put a level on the gun and a level on the brake if you want it perfectly flat. So yeah, so that was.
Awesome.
Yep, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, that's awesome. That's a great feature. Now, just because I'm in a similar trade, I've been curious, what kind of 5-axis CNC did he get?
He got a Brother MX 140, so it's the older
Okay.
version. Um, I don't. You probably. I got a video of it, kind of like, it's not his, but it's a different one. It's really capable machine, and at the same time, it's really uncapable too. Because I don't know if you I don't know if you do any 5-axis work.
Yeah, I
So like
have.
his. Okay, so his has 7 inches on the width that it can move, and 11 inches on the forward back. So at first you think that's quite a bit, but once you start tilting stuff and adding tooling in there, that brake is like, there's some limitations on that. That as small as that brake is, I think it's like 3 inches long. You do not have much room. Like, we were almost running out of room on that.
Is it
So
like a trunnion machine, or is it rotaries?
it's a rotary. Yeah,
Like it's got
basically,
like a rotary and a rotary, or is it
um,
actual like trunnion?
like a trunnion on the bottom, then like basically like a lathe chuck in the middle.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I'll show a video at the end of one of them running.
Okay.
It's neat, like I said, but it's also, man, there's a lot of stuff on the machine that's crazy. And his, part of the reason his was cheap, that we didn't realize this at the beginning, was it was an older generation. So this was the first generation that Brother put in the States. I think his is a 2014. So at the time there were some ITAR regulations that it doesn't support some stuff that it should, because they were worried about it going into like wrong hands in like a third world country or somebody not friendly to the States. So like his cam software, maybe there's some other ones, but his cam software does not support that machine 100%.
Yeah. I mean, with CNC programming, especially 5-axis, post processor is kind of everything, and how
Yeah,
well
and there,
your cam or your software integrates with it is certainly big.
and like there was some funky stuff with that. So I had to get into the parameters for whatever reason. Like if you're running English on it, it won't let that rotary spin at that like fast speeds, and you can't jump in the print. Like, it blew my mind. I kept thinking, you're wrong on that. Looked on all the forums, we couldn't get it. So there's something with the conversion and something with it. So we had to switch it to metric to actually get it to move at the right speeds. Like, for whatever reason, if you were in English, that, I guess it'd be the 4th-axis turning, it turned like a turtle at full
Hmm.
go. And like, but rapid, it would go like 100 mile an hour, but you couldn't feed it past a certain feed in English. So
Weird.
then, yeah, it was really weird. We had to do a lot of stuff in the parameters that took a lot more time than we thought would. And like I said, with his being unsupported by the post processor in some spots, what we're actually doing the ports with a macro that I hand programmed, because like I said, the 5th axis didn't like some of those 5-axis moves, so I had to write a macro by hand to program the ports.
Yeah, that is. Is it FANUC or is it like a PC based?
It's
The
similar
control.
to it's similar to FANUC. It's actually Brother's own. So
Yeah.
Brother makes CNC machines they do like sewing machines, and I guess they're really good at them. If you ran a FANUC one, like I work for a Japanese company, we got a lot of Japanese CNC machines. So like the controls made a whole bunch of sense to me, and it's real similar to FANUC, but it's not FANUC.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I'm sure everyone's lost by now, but I was just curious. I've heard of Brother. I mean, I think they may even be Matsura. I think I've seen them in the same booth at IMTS with Matsura. So I don't know if whoever imports them imports Brother too. But I know I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, their importer imports I think 3 or 4 different ones. And they're a small machine. I mean, they're perfect for doing like knife and gun handles, but anything else, it's kind of, I don't know, they're a specialty machine for a market.
Yep. All right, so we'll go back into design here. So we kind of left off. You're talking about the top ports and adjustable ports really didn't act like most people think they're going to act.
Yeah, and that's like I said, I had that preconceived notion, and sounds like you kind of went down that path too, and we just decided not to do them. So this is a video of my brother, and we had a friend with a full auto, and I mean, the gun doesn't move. Like my brother shot it. He hadn't really shot much before. That was his first time shooting it in full auto. And he's like, that's like playing Call of Duty. The gun just moves at whatever. You just move it around and you can aim it at anything and it doesn't move. So like he was pretty happy. So the next thing we did was, well, how many ports do you need? So I went through a little test on that, and I'll show you the effect of each port. It's kind of cool. Like you don't realize how important that first port is till you watch this video. So this is a quick sled test of us putting it on a sled. So that's a standard A2, and it moves at about 60 inches. So with one port, 19 and a half. 2 ports get you about 13 and a half. Then your third port gets you 10, and your fourth port gets you just a little bit more. So if you look at it, that first port's doing the majority of the work, and by the time you get to the fourth port, it's pretty much done. But just for comparison purposes, so like our 5-axis design on that first port is about equivalent to a standard 3-port 90-degree brake. So if somebody tells you that a 3-port standard 90-degree brake is the greatest thing since sliced bread, all the ones I tested, they're pretty much falling in that 67%. Coda Fury had the top at 70%. It's just physics. You can't overcome that without rearward baffles.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I've used at least one of those brakes there, and they do okay, but they're definitely not the best, flattest shooting brake in the.
Yeah, and if you want something that's not blowing blast back at you, that may be a good option. Like I said, ours is specifically designed to be the flattest shooting brake you can buy. So there are some, I guess, negatives to it, but there's a lot of positives to it if you want to go fast and shoot fast. And once you get into the rearward baffle placing Blake, so these are all done on a 4th axis, except ours is 2 ports, and we're beating those on the sled test. So I thought that was pretty impressive. Then you get into the higher tech brakes like the Hypertack and Apollo Max. And our 3-port, like I said, we cut it in a saw with 3 ports. We're just edging out the Hypertap and almost tied with the Apollo Max. And our 4th port just kind of gives us the edge on that, just a little bit more. But
yeah, and I've actually used the Hypertap, their 6.5 Creedmoor brake, and that gives me a little comparison. They probably are, comparatively they're both very good brakes. I mean, I can't compare a 6.5 to a 5.56, but using both
Sure.
of them, I can see, you know, in my experience, it matches what you've got here in your data, and that both of them are impressively flat shooting brakes.
Yeah, so they make a very good brake. I believe that one might be a 5th axis design too. I'm not sure if they could do that with a 4+1, but to get into that, you need a higher tech CNC and higher tech programming. And of course, that adds into the cost on it. But yeah, and like you said, the performance, so if you go from like a 223 to like a 6.5, it's going to be very similar for what they do. You just got more gas than a larger caliber, but the design's still a good design. This was kind of another test we did. This I mounted a cell phone on my scope, then had the gun on a tripod in a bag. Like at first, it seems like a really stable setup, but you're off to the side with the camera, so you're not really like hunkered down in it, and your shoulders off. So it actually induces a little more movement than you would think. So I kind of thought it simulated a barricade after shooting it that way, and the results kind of simulated what I seen. Like I've shot off a barricade in my backyard with my Hollywood and kind of bump fire the gun by mistake, like had it loose on my shoulder. And, you know, first I'm like, oh crap, it's going off target. Then you hear it go ding, ding. So very capable if everything's in alignment. So as long as your gun's coming straight back and you're not putting any force on it, I've had really good results with it. That's what this testing kind of simulated. And I know there's a lot of people out there that say, oh, all you need is an A2. It doesn't, a 223 doesn't have much recoil. It doesn't, but when you're trying to shoot 300 yards off something, you start seeing it at these distances that a little bit of movement is a lot. So like,
Yeah, you know, I'll give a quick example of that because you're right. I just I was out shooting at my in-laws yesterday, and I had it was an 18-inch rifle. It had a suppressor on it, so nothing really muzzle device related. But my 8-year-old wanted to shoot a little bit, and my 8-year-old is fairly small as far as 8-year-olds go, and so he took a couple shots, and even with it on a tripod and a fairly heavy 18-inch, it wasn't recoil like hurting recoil, but it actually like the front leg came off the ground. It moved a little. I mean, that is reticle off target. So if your goal, like you know, in competition, which is to get fast shots and fast follow-ups, that muzzle rise is enough that it's going to slow you down shot to shot, especially if you're trying to go one shot to the next. You know, you got to kind of bring the muzzle down and go on. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this just shows a quick video. So we took the A2 back at 300 yards, and you see it move. That's about 10 foot, whereas like the Hollywood just stayed right on target and hardly moved. So if you got a good brake, like these top brakes are making a big difference on that. Like on the other hand, if you're shooting like a bill drill at 15 yards, there's hardly any difference on that. Your groups may widen up, but if you got a good stable position, you're not going to see it quite as much. Like where I really saw the difference was like the A2 versus some of the better brakes. Like any of the better brakes, you can pull the trigger as fast as you want and keep the A zone. Where like the A2, I had to slow down to like from 17 splits to like maybe 21s. Still fast, but a little bit of a difference on that. I mean, if you're shooting like a standstill stage, it might be the difference by, you know, 15%. But if you're moving and shooting, might not be. But if you're in a bad position and are off shoulder, kind of hunting, one of these better brakes will be a little better on that. And where I really seen the difference was one on the long range, then two doing like a 50-yard plate rack in my backyard. It's like, you know, like I'm always like evaluating stuff as like an engineer. It's like, you know, how good is ours? And this is the drill that's like ours didn't move. Like this is me shooting the 50-yard plate rack with the brake, and it's pretty much, you know, pretty consistent fast fire, hit. Whereas if you get into some of the, like say the Mikulik that, you know, it's 19 inches of movement or 70% recoil reduction, sounds good, but at that distance, just a little bit off moves your gun quite a bit, and it's harder to keep going at a fast pace. So like I said, I did a video, and I evaluated multiple breaks, and really I felt ours was the best. I mean, I may be biased because it's mine, but cost wise, like we're competitive on that. Concussion, they're all allowed. They're all race cars. Ours wasn't the worst. It wasn't the best. Sled test, ours was the best. Plate test at 300. These three brakes all stayed on, and I felt like they could go further. And it's not quite as scientific because there is some input from the shooter on that, but it was evident on that. And then like all the shooting skill stuff, you could see the better brakes do better results.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is I like this information. So it's your stuff, you're doing the testing, but you're sharing. I mean, this is all, like you said, this is all, there's a lot of ways to get to the same answer. And for instance, a Mikalik brake, if you buy one of those and you do a whole bunch of other tuning on your gun, you can get a Mikalik brake in your whole gun shooting pretty darn flat. Maybe it's real light bolt and light buffer and your gas is tuned down. And I mean, there's a lot of ways to get some pretty darn flat shooting guns. And then you got to decide, well, do I want to take the, if you tune a gun down to get a Mitra shooting like really flat, you may be kind of on the edge of reliability when it starts getting cold. I mean, you've been in 3-gun a while. You've seen how you can tune something to where it barely works. Or, okay, well, we can open up the window a little bit. And yeah, our guns maybe would have had a little bit more recoil because we're running higher gas pressure, but I buy a little higher brake and a little higher dollar brake and a little more effective. And now it runs just as flat, but I'm not skirting the edge of reliability.
Yeah, exactly. Like I stopped running adjustable gas systems because I've had that fail on me multiple times that gets carboned up, and that seems to be like the weakest point of the gun. Then if you had it maybe where you thought it was good, it gets a little carboned up. Well, now you're on that edge where one malfunction is going to make the difference in a match, right? If you have a gun that runs 100%, it's going to be better than a gun that runs 95% and shoots flatter. So you can't
Absolutely. I've gone away from adjustable gas myself. If I need to tune anything, it's with buffers and springs and muzzle brakes and that sort of thing.
Yep. And the interesting thing, originally I was going to do something low budget, best value, right? So like everybody says the Mikalik brake is the best value. It's a very good value if you got $65 to spend and that's the brake that you can afford. Don't let that stop you. Buy that brake, you're going to get a significant recoil reduction. But if you got twice the money to spend, or even if you got $90, well, the performance difference is pretty impressive. Like most things, as the cost goes up, the performance kind of just follows it slowly. But if you add 50% more and buy a $90 brake, you go from 19 inches to 14 inches on the sled, which is about the equivalent of the difference. And if you spend twice as much, you cut the recoil in half, like with a Hollywood or Apollo. So definitely the better brakes are offering a good value at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get what you pay for. That's kind of the reality. Sometimes things cost a little bit more and you don't get much, but it's hard to get the cheapest thing and have it the highest performance, right? I don't know of anything in guns that does that.
Yeah, most things in life don't, right? That you're always giving up something, but it definitely proves that whatever your budget is, you've got kind of a market that's gonna get you at least a performance increase. And this, like we were talking about the machine, so this is his machine running a different part from somebody else. So you'll think it's cool, but like you could have it spin like that on the 4th axis and do all kinds of cutting. And with it being a 30 taper, it is extremely fast. It's almost frightening when you're programming it. The tool changes, everything is just lightning fast on it. So they're doing, I think, alternators there, but as you can see, they're pretty much using the whole work envelope that they have. But most
Yeah,
people probably.
that is. Well, no, that's real. I mean, that's really cool stuff. And it was Yamazin is who. That's where I've seen these brothers because we've got. I used to program for a 5-axis Matsura, and that's Yamazin who sells these. Is the one who is in charge of Matsura USA, I guess.
Yeah, so you probably understand all the problems with 5-axis. I mean, you're probably a pro at it. This was our first experience with it, so there was a lot of learning on just like tooling and all kinds of stuff. Because you run out of clearances when you start bending this stuff in different positions. Then his is lightning fast, like with that 30 taper and the tool changes. Everything is crazy. At least to me, I don't do a lot of programming like this. You probably do all the time though.
Yeah, no, I mean that's still moving pretty quick, and I mean it's all like anything. It depends on the material. It looks like, is that aluminum you're cutting there, or?
That's aluminum they're cutting.
Yeah. So you're screaming when you do aluminum stuff. I mean, I'm trying to. I can't everything I do is in standard, so I can't really convert metric feeds and speeds in my head. But that's definitely cooking.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's his. This is actually his machine right there, showing it in with our part in there. So it's just a bar that we stick in there. By the time you add that chuck and the jaws on the chuck and a little bit of extra clearance, there is not much left. And like he's pointing to the screen in the one, and like as my brother says, clearance is clearance, even though it's a 1/16 of an inch between that and the chuck jaw, the cutter body, just to get it in there.
Yeah, and that's nerve-wracking because what's on the screen is not always what's in real life. So
yeah,
things that look like they have clearance don't always.
right. Yeah, and especially like when we were doing the hand programming on the radial cut, it's like we were doing cuts with wood. Like my dad had a broom handle he cut down that was 1 inch. It's like, all right, it's cheaper to break that than it is to break like a part or a tool. And even then, like you kind of get into some crazy stuff with the angles on that port. We had a drilled. So what we do for the drilling I guess cutting the material out of the port is that when it goes around, that we're actually drilling these out because drilling is about the fastest way to remove material. So it does 40 drilled holes by the time it does all those ports. And the first drill, we had one just laying around the shop as an OSG. It did really good. We ran it to Tool Life. Then my brother bought, forget what the company was. It was maybe a Goering or something. So we bought 5 of these drills at $100 a pop. First one we put in, didn't even cut apart, snaps.
Oh wow!
So then we're like,
I've had good luck with Goering.
yeah, I say they're top-notch manufacturers. Just when you go to that really steep angle, their drill just didn't do it. Like we changed the feeds, trying to get it to work, break the next one. It's like that's weird. It worked on the OSG. Then lo and behold, I found some off eBay. I don't know, some company out of China must be clearing their inventory. And I was buying these drills that were regularly like 80 to $100 for like $10 a piece, and those cut it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, tools are it's frustrating some days, especially when they manufacture change how they're making their tool and what worked before doesn't. I mean, all this stuff gets so specialized that you wouldn't think that a little geometry change would do it, but as you've seen, it does.
Yeah, it was just one manufacturer at a different. We thought Goering would be a better one on that, and they make great products. We run them at my work all the time, but for whatever reason, that application it didn't work.
Yep, that's what it's like. And 5-axis is a lot like mill turn, which is multi-axis as well. And whatever your envelope is, no matter how big or small it is, it's the wrong size for whatever you're trying to do. I mean, I've had to cut down shanks on tools and find special holders, and it's like you're always, whatever you have is the wrong length for what you're trying to machine. So
Yeah,
especially when you get smaller.
Yep, like you said, it was just every one of these things is right on the edge of just be in the right length, or you have to have the right holder to make it just barely fit without hitting the part. And his windows are real small on that machine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't matter how big the machine gets, you're always wish you had a different size or a little bit bigger.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge learning experience on that. And
Yeah.
this is my brother's company. Like I said, he makes a lot of grips, 1911s, anything, I guess Ruger's, all kinds of stuff. Then primarily he's doing gun products. So he does, or not gun products, knife products for different suppliers. So he does like the Kydex for a lot of people. He does the grips. Now he's getting into the blades where he's got a water jet that he's cutting blades on that for the raw. Then he's doing some CNC stuff with another machine he bought to actually get almost the finished form on them. So so they're ready to go grinding. Then he should release a knife line, like a fixed straight blade, probably next spring. He's trying to get into that. He's an excellent manufacturer. The bad part is that we're not good at advertising. That we're kind of nerds on the CNC side.
Yes, that is definitely, the advertising part is hard. And actually, I have some of his grips, because back in the day when I was still shooting a Rock Island, I actually emailed him because I had grips for it, but I wanted to get a spare set because I wanted to silicone carbide them.
Sure.
So I emailed him. I said, "Hey, if you have any blims of the Rock Island, could I buy them from you? Because all I'm going to do is like sand this down so it's thinner, so when I add the silicone carbide, it's not, I mean, that's a thick grip anyways." And he was nice enough to, actually, I think I emailed him that, and then I asked him, I said, because you had mentioned that your family had a company, and so I asked you, and I think he ended up just sending them to me. But yeah, sure. So the grips on my Rock Island, which I haven't used it in a while, it's just in the safe over there, is a Stoner CNC grips, just sanded down a little thinner, and like 50 grit silicone carbide or something like that.
Cool.
But they fit great. I mean, they're very nice grips.
Yeah, so and he's really upped his game since that. So he bought what's called a micro view. So it's almost like I guess it's an optical CMM. So like anything that he's making now, he puts a part on there and it does like a scan of it, then it creates a DXF. So his geometry is now perfect on anything that he gets. So if he gets a new gun, his geometry, it's not like he's measuring the part or trying to figure it out. He measures the gun and it puts it within, I want to say it's within maybe 100 thousandths or a 0.0001, less than 1,000.
A thou. 001's a thou, yeah.
It might be a thou, it might be less than a thou.
Yeah, that's good.
It's cool because like my kid put a penny on there, and like you could look in there and you could see like Lincoln in the White House or on the background of that thing. So it zooms into something crazy on like 200x, and the quality is really good on it.
Yeah, well, I would bet if it's a thou, like the gun, whatever you're putting the gun on, whatever gun you're putting those on, probably has more variance in the actual form of it than that CNC is going to have, or that measuring device is going to have, CMM.
Yeah, that's correct. There'd be enough variance between all the tolerances, and gun parts usually aren't notoriously high tolerance.
No, they're not.
Huh.
So, well, is there anything else, I guess, before we're kind of getting towards wrapping it up? I mean, I like, really, I hope other people like it. I enjoyed seeing all the testing you guys did, and it's easy to say that your product is the best, or we've put a lot of testing in, but you've done the work. I know I've bought gun products that after buying them and putting them on things and using them a little, you kind of get the feeling that someone came up with a design, made one iteration, maybe two, and didn't really think it through, because It works, but it doesn't work great. I'm sure you bought enough gun stuff. I'm sure you've run into that.
Yeah, I said that's kind of what we were trying not to do. We're trying to verify, like test some of the best ones out there and really go through the process, really understand what works and doesn't work, then market it as what's working for it. Then
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go on.
I think, I guess in the future, we're going to kind of send this out for like a 6.5 millimeter version, then probably like a 300. We do have a 9 millimeter version that's out there. So if you want, honestly, I don't think anybody in the 9 millimeter market's really done anything. They're all flat port comps. Ours is the only one that I've seen that would have a huge performance difference on it. And granted, there's not a lot of powder to work with, but you put the best comp on there, you should have the best break, the best performance you can get.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh man, where was I going to go with this? I just had a thought and I lost it. But shoot. My brain just went if I come back to it, I'll think about it. So one thing, Eric, they were nice enough, Stoner CNC was nice enough to send over some brakes. So we are going to give these away. I think what we're going to do is follow the Action Shooting Show on YouTube and Instagram, and then Stoner CNC on Instagram or on YouTube. Do you guys have an Instagram as well? I should have asked this beforehand.
We do, but actually YouTube's kind of the platform we're using.
Okay. So follow on all three of those, so the Instagram and the 2 YouTubes, and I will put a post on, I think I'll do the Instagram because it's easiest for me to kind of pick a winner off of Instagram followers. So I'll have a post on, well, I take that back. We'll just do it on this YouTube video. So if you follow us on both companies on YouTube and post inside the comments on this, we'll pick a winner. I've got 3 brakes here to give away, and then two hats. So we want to give those out, but you gotta follow both, subscribe to both YouTubes for us. Does that sound like a plan, Eric?
Yep. That sounds good to me.
Oh, I do remember what I was going to say, because I know people are listening to this and they're going to say, well, I have so-and-so's brake and it's the best. There is a lot of different guns out there. They're set up differently. All these parts, I mean, when people are building ARs at home, there's not a standard configuration. So he's shown some testing here, which I think is great of what they found. Again, how you tune your gun, what ammo you're using, like all these are going to probably perform about the same at the top of the thing. One of them may just do way, way better than the others. And, you know, every once in a while you find something, doesn't matter how good of a product it is, it doesn't work in some situation. But what you're going to find is, like you said, these top brakes that are designed and, you know, a lot of R&D's put into them, you're probably going to be able to plug and play on just any AR and get that performance. So I don't want anyone going out of here. I mean, I've used it, and I think it's a great brake, and Eric's done the testing, but there's a lot of good products out there. I'm sure there's stuff that he hasn't tested that's good too. So don't get up in arms, I guess, if his testing didn't match your experience, because on your gun, that brake may, that Miklik may be the best brake in the world because of the combination of gun, ammo, like, you just don't know. I mean, does that seem fair to say?
Yeah, so there's a lot of variables, and certain characteristics are definitely, I mean, if you want the best looking brake, like somebody's going to tell you that X is the best looking, right? The best is kind of in the mind of the beholder, right?
Yep. And they're going to buy one brake. If I buy a $200 brake and I put it on my gun and that's all I've used, that's got to be the best brake in the world, because I spent that much money on it and I want it to be the best brake in the world. So, yeah. But it is nice to see. I appreciate, as someone in an engineering field, I like seeing testing behind things and iterations and kind of figuring out, like, well, what really works well in most of the situations. And I think you'd be hard pressed to buy one of these and not if you like muzzle brakes. I've kind of I ran this. This is the first brake I've run in a little while. I mean, I've run a bunch of these other brakes in the past. I've kind of, for the sports that I do now, I've switched to shooting suppressors on most everything. And but they don't act like a brake. You know what I mean? It's not the flattest shooting way to shoot a gun at all. I mean, it's not bad. It's still 223, but if you want flat shooting, I mean, couple matches I shot this on my 16-inch gun, it was noticeably flatter shooting than like the other stuff that I run.
Yep. So there's all kinds of different muzzle devices, like Ryan said. So it's definitely not one size fits all.
If I really hated myself, I'd try this on my 12.5, because I imagine on a 12.5 this thing would shoot about as flat as possible, but you would probably almost need to triple muff for something that short, because it was pretty loud. It was pretty loud on even a 16-inch.
Yeah, I would not recommend it on anything. A 16 is probably you could do a 14.5 and I think be okay. I wouldn't try it any shorter. All my stuff's 16. I couldn't tell you what a 14 is, but like even the Apollo Max, it says specifically on their brake, do not shoot it on anything but a 16-inch or bigger.
Oh, okay, so, that's good. That's good that we talked about that then. Yeah, and this would not be a good brake. I've got a 2-port that works with my suppressor on my 12.5, and the occasional times I've shot that without a can on it, it is. I don't know if those are angled ports. I'll have to look what the ports look like on that. It's absolutely miserable to shoot. And that's only a 2-port brake, you know. That's not this. I mean, there's probably so much gas going out the front of that those ports aren't catching. So
yeah, I would say any of the top brakes, anything with rearward baffles, you probably want a full-length gun, ideally.
And that's what I mean. A 12.5 doesn't really. We're talking race guns here, you know, 3-gun right. And USPSA type stuff. And I imagine if you shot some of the sniper matches and stuff, if you're not running a can in those, or, you know, gas gun stuff, you're probably going to want something like this, because a 16-inch is really where 14.5, 16-inch is really where it's at.
Right. And I think once we make the brake for the 6.5, you get a longer barrel, so that's even going to be better for the shooter comfort, and
yeah,
our translate into very good reduction on that too. That it's the same concept, right? Just longer barrel, more gas out of a bigger caliber. So you should actually get almost better gains on that.
I would bet. I'd be curious to see that, because like I said, I had the Hyper Tap on a 20-inch 6.5 Creedmoor gas gun, and it was ridiculous. It was very, very impressive with how well it did for such a, because I mean 6.5 is a pretty darn high pressure gun. I mean 308 gas guns, they've got their, you know, their power, but 6.5, the pressure on that is, it's actually, they're hard to build. They're a little harder to build gas guns with it, because it's really easy to blow primers out and, you know, poke holes in the primers and stuff like that. So yeah, I got a lot of advice when I built mine and kind of followed there. You want a longer gas system. I mean, 6.5 on a gas gun, I got lucky. I mean, that's the only gun I have that I do tune gas on anymore, because you kind of have to, you kind of got to tune it down.
Huh. Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, that'd be curious. I'd be curious to see how that comes out when you guys go that way. I mean, it's a smaller market though. That's the only thing. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. I feel like the market would be good on that due to the performance. A lot of those PRS guys, a lot of this stuff is how do you get your name out there, right? How do you get the confidence in the customer, and just how do they know what the best is? I mean, there's so many good companies out there and so many good products, but yeah, so that's where we're trying to figure out how do we do our marketing and how do we reach somebody.
I understand that. It's saturated.
Yeah. But once we get our version out, I'll send you one to try.
Oh, cool. Sounds good. I was shooting it yesterday. I forgot how much fun that. I mean, you can hit 500 yards. You know, I think I was shooting 550 with it, and it makes it so much easier. I mean, there was a little
Sure.
wind going on. Even in an 18-inch with 77 grain, the target I was shooting at with the AR was, I was having trouble getting a good contact. And then you get up behind a 6.5, and it's just like ting, ting, ting. It doesn't take any work at all.
Gotcha. I got one this February. I'm having one, my first bolt gun, my first 6.5. Like, should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I do need to get a bolt gun too for it, because gassers are fun, but bolt guns are just so much easier to shoot. They're easier to shoot. I mean, bolt guns really are a good 6.5 bolt gun's a cheat code.
Right. What kind of accuracy do you get with your 6.5 gas gun?
I got my hand load, and I didn't spend a ton of time. I'm right around an inch and a half. And my guess is if I really worked up a load, I'm shooting 140s. I should probably shoot a little bit lighter bullet through a gas gun, but if I wanted, I could probably get a little bit less. But honestly, I got an episode of the Action Shooting Show coming out, just a real quick one, where I talk about accuracy. But I think people chase accuracy in the shooting sports that they don't really need. I mean, if I was going to go shoot PRS, I would work on getting that to be sub MOA or under. But like anything that I do with a gas gun, a minute and a half is more than good enough, and I need to spend more time just practicing and not going out to the range and trying to shoot little groups with a, from the reloading bench and try to get like that magic load.
Yeah, I think it was Litz did something on that basically a 1 MOA gun is pretty doggone good, that once you start getting out at those extended distances, it's more the wind call, or because the wind at that distance, if you make a wrong call, is going to be further off than your bullet. That, like 1 MOA is kind of, like, I wouldn't say it's the best you could do, but it's good enough for a lot of things until you get your skill level up.
Yeah. Statistically, you're missing for a whole lot of other reasons long before. And honestly, like everyone who says they have a 1 MOA gun is like they shot a bunch of 3-round groups, and they took the one 3-round group that was under an inch, and that's like magically what their gun shoots all the time, instead of like it's probably a 2-inch gun, and if you shoot enough 3-round groups, you're eventually going to get one hole, right?
Right.
The statistic, the statistic grouping, like eventually you can get 3 right on top of each other. That's just you shoot enough rounds downrange.
Right. Yeah, for all the action shooting sports stuff, like 2 MOA is probably good enough. Like obviously you'd want to try to get a little better than that, but if it's more knowing your dope and everything else.
Yep, 100%. I've never, in 3-gun and running gun, I don't think I've ever seen a target under 3 MOA. Like,
Okay.
rare. Maybe I'll say rarely. Sometimes if you're up close, but rarely have I seen anything under 3 MOA. Most of them are 4 and bigger.
Right. Yeah, that's a 4-inch target. 4-inch target at 100 yards. I say Ridgewood does that. That's probably their hardest target. Usually when you go further out, like they're doing like, I don't know, like you said, 4 MOA at 200. So
yeah.
Well, actually, doing that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've shot Ridgewood. And they're definitely, most of the time, at least the ones I've shot. I've put out a 2-inch target once, and we shot it at 70 yards, and I had so much complaining. Everyone's like, well, I can barely see that, blah, blah. I was like, every one of you's probably told me your gun's 1 MOA. That's 2. Like, that should be cakewalk.
Right. And 70 is a little odd on the distance, too.
Well, yeah, it's just that range is, it was a 100-yard bay. By the time you move up in front of the shooting line a little bit, you're probably at 70 or 80 yards instead of the full 100. So,
sure.
Yeah, so it's more than 2 MOA.
Right. Yeah, the hardest part is you're on an unstable platform, on something unstable, right? A barricade.
Yeah, I think I even gave him a roof. I think I gave him a slanted roof to shoot off of, so it really shouldn't have been. I mean, people got it. Although I think I did offhand one time too. That was harder. I got it. I don't know how everyone else felt, but I shot it, so. Every once in a while, you got to do something to make everyone complain. That's my motto as the match director. All right, so we'll wrap this up. You got anything closing you want to say before we kind of wrap all this up?
No, thanks for your time. Thanks for having us on the podcast. Like and subscribe to Ryan. Like and subscribe to Stoner CNC's YouTube. And any questions, I guess either post them in our comments on our break or Ryan's comments, and we'll try to answer the comments. But hopefully everybody liked and had a good podcast.
Yeah, and again, so you like both YouTubes, and then you make a comment in the thread of this YouTube video, you'll be entered to win one of these. We'll say we'll go till the end of the year, since I'll get this up probably this week sometime, so that'll give them a whole month to kind of comment, and we'll hand we'll give some of these out.
Yeah, sounds good. Hopefully somebody needs a muzzle brakes, gets one of ours and tries it and has a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everyone for watching, and hope to see you guys out in the range.